Welcome to our second video about adding and subtracting integers. Now, as a teacher, I'm saying this to you very clearly. I have found this an extremely difficult concept to teach my grade 8s because it sometimes feels really weird. For instance, if I tell you 3 minus -7. What does that even mean? Okay? So what I'm going to try in this video is to explain to you an easy way to do those kind of sums. So how do I add and subtract integers? Now this is going to lead me to some rules. I'm going to say in inverted commas, I like to more call it a spidey sense. My spidey sense is going to be tingling about this. So when I look at, let's say, a box with pluses and minuses in them, if you count up very clearly, you will see there are 5 positives. And how many negatives are there? 6 negatives. So which one is the most? Definitely the negatives. Now, if I look at saying what is my net result, it would kind of tell me, it's just a fancy word of saying, if a plus and a minus cancel each other out, what will I be left with in the end? Well, I would be left with 1 negative. If we write this in terms of a number, we can write it as -1. So my net result would be -1 because there's one more negative than there is a positive. I hope you get that. Now, this box I can actually add as many pluses and minuses in them as long as I end up with having one more negative than a positive, then my net result will still be negative. Let me explain. So if I, for instance, put another plus there and a minus there, and I put another plus there, and I put another minus there, what is my net result? Well, now I have 7 positives and 8 negatives, so my answer is still -1. I hope that you understand what I'm doing. If you don't know where I'm going with this, please just be patient, okay? So I'm just going to go back to my original equation. So I've got 5 positives and 6 negatives in there. But now, what if I tell you that I'm adding 3 negatives? Or you can kind of see this in mathematical terms as -3. But let's just keep it for now as 3 negatives. So let's put in 3 extra negatives in there. Okay? What's going to happen to my net results? Well, I've now got 5 positives, but how many negatives do I now have? I've got 9 negatives. So what is my net result? I'm getting -4. So I end up having 4 more negatives than positives. Let's write this down mathematically speaking. Remember, I started with -1. And now I've added what? What did I add? I added 3 negatives. And what did I end up with? I ended up with -4. That is very interesting. So if I add negatives, my answer becomes more negative. And just let that sink in the way that I say it. If I add negatives, then my answer is going to become more negative. And that makes so much more sense to me. Hopefully to you as well. But let's look at the numbering system. I started off with -1. I end up at -4. So if I draw my number line, and don't forget your arrows, because they don't stop there, they carry on to infinity and beyond. I've basically said -1 plus -3 is the same as going from -1, 3 in the negative direction. That is very interesting, because if we now try and make a logical deduction, can we not say that a plus, if I distribute it into that bracket, what do I end up with? Look there. If I take that plus and I distribute it in, my answer is going to become a negative. Is it a coincidence? The answer is no, it isn't. That's actually what the next video is about. But we're discovering these things for ourselves. So I encourage you to go and do 1 or 2 more sums. But let's try another one. Let's start now with the same end net result, having 5 positives and 9 negatives. Remember, that ended up to giving me 4 more negatives. Okay? Let's go and now subtract 5 negatives, which in mathematical terms, you can kind of see the same as saying -5. I hope that you get that. So what am I doing? I am now looking in my box and I'm erasing 5 of the negatives. And what do I end up with? I end up with 5 positives and 4 negatives, which means my answer is +1. Now think about that logically, ladies and gents. I'm using that word a lot, logic, because I want you to think about it. I'm taking my answer, which is -4, originally, my original state, -4. Now I am subtracting negatives. Is my answer becoming more positive or more negative? Think about it. I'm taking negatives away. Think about taking ice out of water. Is your water going to become warmer or colder? It's going to become warmer. That's why when I subtract negatives, my answer is becoming more positive, because I'm removing some of the ice, some of the negatives. So if I look at this, I'm saying that -5 subtract 5 negatives gives me an answer of +1. Now, let's do a number line. -4 is my starting point. I end up at 1, so it's the same as adding 5 from -4, and I end up with +1. So therefore, I can say that -4 minus -5 is exactly the same as -4 plus 5. So in other words, if I look at this, that minus, if I multiply it into my bracket, the answer that I end up with is a plus. And there, ladies and gentlemen, you have discovered one of the rules with integers. But I'm not going to get stuck in on the rules now. What I would like you to do is to think about these processes. If you are struggling a little bit, I am imploring you, please go and watch the video again. Try a few sums and go for it. Stick it through. You will master this if you practice enough. In our next video, we are going to solidify these rules that I've been talking about when we're looking at multiplication and division of integers. And these rules, ladies and gents, I cannot stress how important they are. So this is Mr. VG signing out. Have a beautiful and amazing rest of your day. Cheers.